Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Stafford, and I'm a business graduate student here at Regent University. In this presentation, I'm discussing the concept of moral ballasters in business and how these can help Christians navigate social pressures and ethical dilemmas. I will first discuss the secular response to these issues and then counter with the Christian response. Please pause the video as needed to read more details on the slides. Did you know one word has the power to end someone's career or their business? If you live in the US, you've almost definitely heard of cancel culture, a social phenomenon where public figures are ostracized for doing something controversial. However, cancel culture and other social pressure tactics, like public shaming, boycotts, and corporate rating systems, affect more than just celebrities. They also affect businesses and nonprofits. In 2020 alone, hundreds of US businesses were canceled, including L'Oreal Paris, Goodyear Tire, and Oreo. In addition, 64% of consumers reported that they would buy or boycott a brand because of its position on a social issue. So the question is, how can businesses, and especially Christian businesses, respond to these controversial issues and social pressures in a biblical way? The secular response to being canceled is typically very reactive instead of proactive. Often you'll see businesses scrambling to put together some type of PR campaign without actually addressing the issue or caring about the people impacted. When it comes down to it, secular companies typically rely heavily on the three normative ethical theories to navigate such moral issues. Normative ethical theory is the study of right and wrong and how people should act. It can be broken into three primary categories: virtue ethics, duty ethics, and consequentialist ethics. We're going to explore these three theories and how they handle moral dilemmas in modern business, because it's important to understand our cultural baseline so we don't superimpose our norms over God's truth. This also can help Christian business owners consciously respond differently to cancel culture and social pressure. First, virtue ethics. Virtue ethics calls for adherence to a set list of principles. Whether those be personal or corporate values depends on what type of virtue ethics it is. In action based virtue ethics, for example, a Christian and a Taoist would have to follow the company's set list of rules and act the same way. In agent based virtue ethics, people evaluate situations based on their personal values. One current example of virtue ethics in business is in the debate over the EU's new conflict minerals regulations. The EU is attempting to legislate the trade of tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold because they're often used to finance terrorist activity. The EU imposing and enforcing regulations is a very action-based virtue ethics solution to this problem. Is this response biblical, though? This scripture shows Jesus calling out the biggest flaw in virtue ethics from a Christian perspective. No one is good, so how can human agents know their standards are good enough to be imposed as law? Second, consequentialist ethics. Another way corporations handle moral situations is through consequentialism. Consequentialist ethics primarily uses the consequences of an action to determine right from wrong. They act to maximize the good. In the global picture, consequentialist businesses use tools like the felicific calculus. This is essentially a cost-benefit analysis that calculates the estimated pleasure or pain an action will cause. An example of consequentialist ethics in business is the controversy over the exploding Ford Pinto cars in 1999. Ford's Pinto car had a design flaw where the engine would explode in collisions. The company had access to a newer, safer design, but decided not to switch because it would cost $11 per car. The company defended itself on the grounds that its consequentialist cost-benefit analysis showed the cost was greater than the impact. This is a common consequentialist response to ethical dilemmas. But is this response biblical? As this scripture demonstrates, since we can't know the future, consequentialism will always fail in our limited human hands. Finally, duty ethics. In this theory, actions and motives are right or wrong in themselves, and people are instructed to take normative action based on their sociocultural environment. The concept of personal autonomy is also a key aspect of this theory. One current example of duty ethics is in the debate over companies like Google abusing their market power. The lawsuits claim that they are using influence over key distribution channels to control businesses and manipulate consumers. Google's counterargument is twofold. First, that people are not stupid and can make their own decisions, aka personal autonomy. Second, that their motives are good and their service is good, so they have not done anything unethical. However, is this biblical? As this verse shows, we're called to a higher standard than simply adhering to the behavior, laws, and customs of this world. All right, now that we've covered those three normative theories, we'll talk about a Christian response to moral dilemmas. Christian ethics uses moral balusters like God's sovereignty, stewardship, and sanctity of life to determine right from wrong. Like it says in Ecclesiastes 8:7, we can overcome social pressures that cancel us or accuse us day and night through Christ and through our bold testimony. To do this, here are some practical action steps. First, evaluate your current moral tenets and determine whether they're from normative ethics or from the Bible, using the column graphics at the end of this presentation. Second, construct moral balusters from scriptural values. We should be anticipating value attacks and be prepared. In this world, we'll have trouble, but take heart because Christ has overcome the world. To tie this all together, let's go through the previous examples and apply a Christian lens. In the EU example, the biblical moral balusters of stewardship and human dignity demand we protect the rights of people. But the Bible also instructs us to be wise, humble, and relational. Instead of imposing arbitrary laws, a Christian company should take a deep, prayerful look at the root issue of the problem and work to solve it by partnering with those on the ground. In the Ford Motor Cars example, the Bible commands us to value human life and not be consumed with the love of power or money. A Christian response would have been to own the mistake and correct the cars even though it cost more. In the Google example, the Bible commands Christians to shepherd the weak and not domineer over those in their power or compel them. We're called to look out for those in our care and not manipulate them. A Christian response would be to evaluate our personal integrity instead of putting the burden on the consumer. I hope this breakdown will help Christian business owners to better distinguish their cultural morality from biblical morality and aid them in handling controversial issues and social pressures. At the end of this presentation file, I've included examples of common balusters associated with the Americanized version of each normative ethical theory. These undermine Christian values and create confusion in issues. It may be useful to go through these graphics and consider which balusters apply to you. Thank you so much.